Good afternoon and welcome back to another session on my Declassified Caribbean News Network channel. And thank you so much for joining. And today we are going to deal with another riveting and stimulating title. China, the US, and Russia agree on this future. Cashless society, AI, and transhumanism. And many people are deceived by the fact that they're just looking at the superficial media sources and they talk about what is happening and what they're seeing in the media constantly. And people behave as if they're watching a sports match and they're suggesting who is going to win. Is it China or is it United States? Or is it Russia, Iran, and all of that? And some of that might be true. Some of the wranglings and the contradictions and the conflicts that you're seeing, some of these things are true, but what if that is not the full story? And that is what we have to look at, and that is why it requires critical thinking, critical, deep analyses, which is highly lacking in our society today. Now, what if the biggest geopolitical rivals on earth actually agree on something? The United States, China, Russia. They disagree on Ukraine. They disagree on Taiwan. They disagree on trade. They disagree on sanctions. They disagree on military alliances. But beneath the headlines, there may be one area where all three powers are moving in the same direction. Artificial intelligence, digital currencies, biometric identification, automation, and perhaps even transhumanism, the merging of man and machine. This afternoon, we're going to explore a provocative question. Are the world's competing superpowers quietly building the same future? And if they are, what does that mean for the Caribbean, Latin America, Africa, and ordinary people everywhere? Very important that we stay attuned to these very important discussions. Now, let us look at the illusion of difference among these three powers, world powers, global powers, if you will. When we watch the news, we are told that the world is divided into competing camps: the West versus China, democracy versus authoritarianism, NATO versus BRICS. And in many ways, these divisions are real. Yeah, so there are some real aspects to them, but they do not stop there. And that is the quintessential point I want to make on this in this video this morning, this afternoon. Yet, if we step back and examine the technological trajectory of these powers, something remarkable appears. All major powers are investing heavily in artificial intelligence, facial recognition, digital identity systems, cashless payment technologies, mass data collection, and automation. And I think that we behave as children. I saw a comment on my video yesterday, and people were commenting. There was this guy who responded that he has traveled to China and how China makes the United States looks like it is a third world country, and that is true, right? That is true. However, what he's not intimating is the fact that all of the Chinese people are controlled. Right? So people tend to look at economics. We tend to be materialistic, not understanding that these governments are aiding and abetting these tech giants to allow us to lose our humanity. And we are rapidly losing our humanity because human lives now and their worth and value depend on how much money they have. Friends and friendships depend on how much money you have or how much money you perhaps don't have, right? If you don't have anybody, nobody's going to want to be your friend anymore, right? Because that is how it operates. So this is how he's looking at it. He's seeing China as having more value than the United States because the Chinese infrastructure is much more sophisticated than that of the US. But what if the Western societies aid and abetted China so that China can be the blueprint, not in terms of the economic might, because they're going to take our economics away from us, but at least from the West, for them to build the authoritarian state that they want to build, they will have to have an authoritarian state that looks on the surface very prosperous for us to say, yes, we want those too, because if not, we won't accept it. Western societies would not have accepted, they would not accept authoritarianism, technocratic authoritarianism, if they didn't see China as a wealthy state. So they have to present that before our eyes. And this now is the trap. And many people are not seeing it because they do not have critical minds to understand the agenda. And that these people have their agendas wrapped up so intelligently and in such a sophisticated manner that if you are not careful, as the Bible suggests, even the very elect, even the very critically minded people will be deceived and are going to be deceived, and to some extent, willfully deceived. The rhetoric is different. The destination often looks surprisingly similar. China calls it modernization, the United States calls it innovation, and Russia calls it sovereignty and technological independence. But all roads seem to lead toward a more digitized society, and they are actually on their way to accomplishing that. Now, tomorrow I'm going to be dealing with this very important topic of AI and transhumanism in the Caribbean, and that is the new normal. And we have not come out of the new normal. Those of you who think that COVID is over, the COVID era is over, we have just begun. If you think that the whole process ended after the vaccines were introduced, let me tell you, we have just begun. Now, let us look at the cashless future. Let's start with money. For thousands of years, human beings used physical forms of exchange, gold, silver, paper money. Today, the world is moving toward digital payments. China has its digital yuan. Russia is developing the digital ruble. The United States continues expanding digital financial infrastructure while studying a central bank digital currency. Many countries are already reducing the role of cash. Supporters say this is progress. Transactions become faster, tax collection becomes easier, crime becomes harder, and financial systems become more efficient. But critics ask an uncomfortable question. What happens when every transaction is tracked? What happens when access to money depends entirely upon digital systems? What happens during cyber attacks, blackouts, as we had the other day, or political crises? A cashless society creates convenience, but it also creates dependency. And what if we have a blackout of many hours, which they are suggesting, and tomorrow afternoon we'll talk more about that more. They're already suggesting that we are going to have frequent blackouts, whether in the United States or in the Caribbean, Europe, we are going to have, that is going to be the new normal. So, and we have, well, if you have money, they're suggesting that you have to buy backup gadgets, equipment, so that you can have your AC going on or your food can be properly refrigerated. So we're heading for a rather interesting future. And many of you are not looking at that. Your eyes are on the football, right? On World Cup. Now, AI and the new economy. The second pillar is artificial intelligence. China is investing billions. The United States leads in many AI technologies, and they're working together, on these things. Do not be fooled. Russia sees AI as essential to national power. Why? Because AI is becoming the new electricity. The countries that dominate AI may dominate the future economy. AI can improve medicine. It can improve logistics. It can improve productivity, but it can also eliminate jobs. And it is already doing that. Millions of workers across the world may face displacement. Call center workers, administrative workers, writers, designers, drivers, even some professionals. The Caribbean cannot ignore this. Our economies depend heavily on services. What happens when software performs tasks once done by human beings? This is not science fiction. It is already happening right before our eyes. Now let's look at surveillance and digital identity. Another trend connects all major powers, the growth of digital identity systems. Governments increasingly seek efficient ways to identify citizens. Supporters argue this reduces fraud, improves service delivery, increases security, yet every expansion of digital identity also expands the potential for surveillance. The more society becomes digital, the more information is collected. Where you travel, what you buy, who you communicate with. Again, this is not unique to China, nor is it unique to the United States, nor Russia. It is becoming a global phenomenon, and that is what we have to understand. All of these things are becoming a global phenomenon. Now let us look at transhumanism, and this is now the fusion of humans with machine. And when we talk to human beings, I think that is already almost there, because during the COVID pandemic and onwards, we can see that human beings are not using their minds. Something is happening, whether through the vaccines, through the water. We don't know what is happening through our food. Something has happened to the human intellect, and people are not able to think, right? People are just not able to think. And there is this group mentality, okay? And we have to get ourselves out of this, because if not, we are going to be lost. We are going to be deceived. And that is what we don't want to happen to us. Now, we arrive at the most controversial topic or subject, transhumanism. What is transhumanism? At its core, it is the belief that technology can fundamentally enhance human beings. Brain-computer interfaces, generic engineering, cybernetic enhancements, artificial intelligence integrated into human decision-making. Supporters see this as the next stage of evolution. Critics see profound ethical dangers. Questions emerge. What happens when technology becomes part of the human body? Who controls that technology? Will enhancements only be available to the wealthy? I'm sure it won't, because the whole ultimate agenda is to control. And the wealthy is going to be controlled too, because as the Bible suggests, the mark of the beast will be given to both the rich and the poor and the bond and the free. No man or woman will escape. Could society become divided between enhanced and unenhanced humans? Today, these questions may sound futuristic, but many technologies that once sounded impossible are already being developed. Very important that we're following these trends. But what is so frightening is how human beings tend to just align themselves with the group, have to be current. You have to have everything that your neighbors have if you are competing. Well, you want to compete with them. I don't want to compete with my neighbor, right? I'm not here to compete with anyone, right? And that is what we have to understand. If we just stop competing, I think then we'll begin to learn to think independently. Now, what's the real question behind all of what I'm suggesting here? The real issue is not whether China, Russia, or the United States are identical. They are not. The real issue is whether technological civilization itself is pushing all major powers in the same direction. The real issue is whether technological civilization itself is pushing all major powers in the same direction, for you to understand and for you to grasp what I'm saying, toward greater automation, toward digital finance, toward data-driven governance, toward AI-assisted decision making, toward deeper integration between human beings and technology. If so, then the debate may no longer be East versus West. The debate may become how much of our humanity are we willing to surrender for efficiency, convenience, security, and power? And we'll also ask the questions, why are they warring against each other? For them to be the primary leader of this, what should we call it now, of this world that is utopic, this future utopic society, that all of them are competing to lead. And you are batting for them too. If you're on Chinese side, and some of you are on the Chinese side, then you're batting for that. If you are on the American side, the West as you call it, then you're batting for that. If you are on Russia or the Russian side, then you are also batting for it. So whichever side that you are batting for, it's almost like the pandemic. If you're on American side, you're batting for the vaccines and the deaths of many people, hundreds of thousands of people, the injury of many people. And many of you went and you took sides because you do not want to think. You do not want to think. And those of the people who claim that they weren't for the vaccines and they were able to speak so eloquently on the deceptions of the pandemic, you find them now being simplistic and simple-minded in the whole war in Iran and, and who is doing what and whose side one should be on. You are simplistic now, and now I barely can have any reasoning with many of the people who presented themselves as knowledgeable about what was happening to the pandemic. And these same people are behaving as if they've lost their minds with the war on Iran and what is happening in Cuba and around the world, not understanding that these wars are laying the foundation and the groundwork for what lies ahead. And this is the contradiction of humanity. And you have to stand your ground. You have to stand your ground. Stand your ground even when you look like you're stupid. Stand your ground even when people don't want to call you. They want to talk to you. You stand your ground because the majority of human beings are going to be lost anyway. Okay? China says it is building the future. America says it is building the future. Russia says it is building the future. But perhaps the more important question is, what kind of future are they building? A future of unprecedented prosperity? A future of surveillance and control? A future of human enhancement? Or some combination of all three? And where does the Caribbean fit into this emerging world? Will we shape the future or simply inherit decisions made elsewhere? That is the conversation we need to have. What do you think are cashless societies, AI, and transhumanism inevitable? Or do we have choices about the world we want to create? Do we really have choices? Or do you think that you have been brainwashed to believe that you have choices? You have none. And let me say something to you. I was reading some very important articles last night, and it is disconcerting. It is concerning. It is frightening where we're heading. And these guys are not playing, and you are playing. You are playing, and they see that you're playing. And they're going to continue to play with your brains, play with your minds, so that you will not be able to understand what is happening. We have to pray for wisdom, because wisdom is the principal thing. We also have to pray, above all, for understanding, because many of us, we pretend as if we understand what is happening because we follow the little basic nonsense coming from the news media, be they the independent or mainstream media. And we think that we are knowledgeable. We think that we understand. based on what we're seeing. But it's what you are not seeing that you have to understand. What is happening behind the scenes? Mia Motley and what she's doing in Barbados is not helping you to understand what is happening in the world. Okay? And that is why you have to understand geopolitics. You have to understand history. And many people, many of the podcasters in the Caribbean, they're just, talking about domestic matters. And maybe that entertaining. But you have to examine, you must examine how geopolitics is tied up with what is happening domestically. Because your prime ministers and presidents are not in control of what they're doing, right? They're puppets of a wider, much broader agenda. And this is the purpose of this channel, to unmask what is happening in the geopolitical realm, because, as I've often said, the truth is the truth. You either accept it or reject it at your own peril. Will you accept the truth? Please do, or be damned if you don't. Thank you so much for joining. All the best to you.